Sciences at The Ohio State University. I just wanted to take a moment and acknowledge the importance of our partnerships with all of you in the agricultural and agribusiness industry. We simply can't do our work without you. It's through our partnership that we're able to be innovative and creative, which is going to be needed as we all try to figure out how to transition from this pandemic. I've been enormously proud of how our faculty and staff have handled the last several weeks, and we look forward to continuing to work with all of you to serve Ohioans and Ohio agriculture, and to make sure that we can deliver on our important mission. We sustain life. Thank you, and go Bucks.
Hi there. I just want to give a special shout out and thank you to all the fruit and vegetable growers and other stakeholders that have helped us out over the years.
Thank you for welcoming us onto your farms to conduct eField's on-farm research. Together, we're advancing Ohio agriculture.
Thank you for letting me come to your farm to showcase Ohio's agriculture through film.
Thank you to all the farmers for all you do to provide food for all of Ohio and the nation. We love what you do, we support you. Whatever you need, let us know what we can do to help you as you endure this crisis.
Thank you for providing space for me to host a field day.
Thank you for being open-minded when I say, can we clean up this shop and bring the symphony in?
Thank you for even saying, yes, we can put the boat on the pond. Thank you for advancing Ohio agriculture.
Thank you for your essential work to help feed our people and drive our economy.
Thank you for the opportunity to present information and knowledge to you that we feel will lead to a better future in Ohio and across the country.
Thank you for helping us plan for our future.
Thank you for always going along with all of our crazy ideas in Delaware County.
Thank you, Ohio farmers.
Thank you for your collaboration. It's been invaluable.
My friends and I would like to thank Marion County livestock producers for their support of OSU Extension programming.
Thank you, Christmas tree growers from Northeastern Ohio, Christmas tree growers. You guys rock. You make my day.
I'd like to thank all the farmers that not only made me part of their business, but made me part of their family.
To all the farmers and ag businesses there throughout the state of Ohio, thank you for supporting the Ag Weather and Climate Program. You make me feel like I'm your weatherman.
A heartfelt thank you to you for trusting us, for working with us, but more importantly, for your friendship. We'll see you soon.
I want to join the rest of our extension team in saying thank you for all that you do to support us and our commitment to leaning on your land grant. During uncertain times, Ohioans can trust that agricultural and agribusiness industries are working hard to keep us all healthy and well-fed under any circumstances in Ohio. Our extension family is proud to stand with you as we work side by side toward this common purpose. We may find ourselves in the middle of difficult times, but we know that we will come out of this stronger and with a renewed sense of mission. We look forward to seeing this through together and for the better days ahead. OH!
I-O!
We hope you enjoyed that video from OSU Extension, and on behalf of our entire farm office team, we would like to say welcome to this evening's program. And I'm going to share my screen so we can get our slides up. And we'd like to welcome you to tonight's program. And again, just like we have done the previous 3 weeks, we have a whole host of topics that we will be sharing tonight. And we have an alphabet. To me, it always like looking through the alphabet when we come to our updates. But we'll be talking about the CARES Act, an update on that, the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. We also will be looking at the Corona Food Assistance Program. We'll be looking at EIDL, which is the Economic Injury Disaster Loan program tonight, as well as looking at what is going on in the ethanol and biofuel markets. And we had a question last week about if Ben could give us an update on his projections for the 2019 ARC and PLC updates as we move through this year. I'd like to introduce to you our team. On tonight's program is Diane Shoemaker, Barry Ward, Ben Brown, myself, David Marison, Peggy Hall, and working the magic behind the scenes, as always, is Julie Strausser. So with that, we'd like to welcome our entire team here tonight, and we're going to jump right into it. We're going to look at those questions that were asked at the end of last week's program. And then, of course, just as a reminder, you're welcome to jump in at the Q&A at any time and ask questions. We'll move through the topics from last week. And if you have questions, don't hesitate to drop them into the chat box. Diane and I will be doing a lot of the monitoring on the backside of those questions and getting them interjected as we go through the next hour. So with that, we're going to start with the CARES Act. And the CARES Act, of course, has been the topic of conversation for each of these farm office lives. And we just put some topic points up there about round 2 was released, and today was a big day for round 2 of the Paycheck Protection Program. Also had some more guidance on sole proprietors and what it means to qualify as a self-employee income, and also about managing your PPP money and looking at that loan forgiveness. So with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to Barry first. Barry, welcome to tonight's program, and thanks for giving us an update. You and Peggy are teaming up here on the CARES Act to give us an update. So I'll turn it over to you, Barry.
All right, thanks, David, and thanks to all of you for joining us. It's the ongoing saga of the Paycheck Protection Program, and we have more to give you here tonight. We're going to go through a few of the things, and we've gotten some additional guidance over the last week, and actually we've got a new piece of legislation. If you want to advance the slide one, there's actually the legislation that was signed Friday that the Senate voted on, and then the House finally enacted is the Paycheck Protection Program and Healthcare Enhancement Act. And this is what added money to the PPP pool. So now we have additional money for better or worse, but I think probably for the most part for the better, because we've got a lot of small businesses that didn't have the opportunity to apply for the Paycheck Protection Program due to it running out of money with the first wave. So this new legislation is, well, it's actually, I guess we're going to say this is the 4th piece of legislation that revolves around the coronavirus issue, COVID-19, and this has got some additional money allocation. No real big change in legislation. It does give us some further guidance and clears some things up on both the Paycheck Protection Program and the Economic Injury and Disaster Loan Program, the EIDL program. So we've got a lot of things that we need to address, I guess, this evening. I've got a few bullet points here that I'm going to try to go through and add some additional pieces. But if you've got questions, by all means, go ahead and ask those. I think we're taking those in the question and answer, that feature that you should have available to you as users. So, okay, first of all, the big news, I guess, is the additional money. And the additional $310 billion was allocated to the Paycheck Protection Program. We're so used to talking in tens and hundreds of billions these days that may not shock us too much, but that's a big chunk of money. I think everyone realizes that. But that money is going to be allocated to the Paycheck Protection Program in order to be used for those loans, whether they be the forgivable portion or loans that are going to eventually be paid back. But that's money that's allocated for banks to work with their various partners, their various clients. Now, there is a portion of that, $60 billion, that they're making and directed towards small lenders. So they're trying to get money into the hands of some of those lenders that may not have had that option last time. So they made that directive in this new piece of legislation. There was also $50 billion additional beyond this 310 that's set aside to replenish the economic injury and disaster loans, the EIDL loans that Peggy's going to talk about in a little bit. So there's additional money there as well. This act also includes some additional money for healthcare facilities, hospitals, and some other things that we're not going to get into tonight. But the big bulk of what we're going to talk about is going to revolve around some additional money, at least here at the beginning, for the Paycheck Protection Program and the EIDL loans. Finally, as of April 24th, we have some additional guidance, some clarification that farms are eligible. Now, up until this point, many lenders, farmers were applying or submitting applications for the PPP loans based on, I guess, just assumptions that farms were going to be eligible and farm employees were going to be eligible. It also provided some additional clarification as far as how self-employed individuals without employees would be able to apply for these PPP loans to compensate them for their own self-employment income. So they don't have employees, they're filing a Schedule C, or in the case of farmers, Schedule Fs. So what is that leading us to? Well, we have this better guidance, the FAQs, the frequently asked questions that the Small Business Administration put out last week, and then added to on Sunday, that piece of information, all that information gave us a little clearer idea of what they're expecting. And we were able to start this morning, and they opened all the application portals again. Lenders were able to start submitting applications this morning at 10:30. So if you already had your application in, and from what we've heard, there were thousands of applications that were already in the pipeline, as they say, and hundreds of millions of dollars already spoken for if those loans were going to be approved. Now, that doesn't mean all of the $310 billion was going to be soaked up just for those loan applications that were in the pipeline. There's a lot of speculation. I know some tweets came out from some of the legislators, senators, and so forth this morning, or over the last couple of days, I should say, talking about the amount of money that was already spoken for from those loans that were in the pipeline. No one that I'm aware of knows for sure exactly what those dollar amounts are, but it was substantial. Now, does that mean we shouldn't apply? I don't think that's the message that I want to get across. I think there's still going to be opportunity this week for folks to apply for PPP and get their applications in with their lenders and have a pretty good opportunity to have their loans submitted and be able to get those proceeds that perhaps hopefully will be forgivable as long as you follow the guidelines. So that's kind of where we're at. For farmers, we've got additional clarification. We had information originally when they provided us information about self-employed folks that only Schedule C income. So that's businesses, but not farm businesses. Schedule C income would be eligible to be declared on the application for submission. Now we have the information as of last week. So farmers using Schedule F income, your net income from 2019, you can use that on your application along with your gross employee wages. So combination. And you have to take, for the Schedule F income, 8/52 of that to use on your application. So essentially it's roughly 2 months. And the same with the employee wages. You're supposed to take what your average employee wage is per employee and divide it or multiply it by 2. And when we get a little bit further along, we're going to multiply that by 2.5 on the application itself, and that's going to give us the amount that we eventually will perhaps have forgivable as long as we follow the guidelines. So hopefully that's clear. We've covered that in the last 2 or 3 farm office lives. So I'm not going to go back and go through all that information as far as what's on the application, but there's 8/52 of your Schedule F income plus 2.5 times your employee average wage per month. Now, one of the things that this causes a little bit of a headache for many farmers, because many farmers may not have any Schedule F income from 2019. That's the self-employment income portion. We can go all the way back to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act to find the source of some of our concern, and that's the elimination of 1031 like-kind exchange for farm machinery. And with that elimination, what we saw and what we have seen since then is a different mix of farm income. So farmers are seeing a lot more income showing up as income on Form 4797. It's ordinary income, but it's not self-employment income. So what does this lead to? It leads to some farmers, especially if you had equipment trade-ins in 2019, you're going to have perhaps income that's not going to qualify for the PPP. It's something that you're going to have to check with pretty quickly with your tax preparer. And if you don't have that income that's eligible, you can do one of two things. You can just obviously forget it. You're not going to have income that's eligible, so you're not going to qualify, at least for your own income. You may have employees that will allow you to qualify. Or you can go back and amend your tax return to change your mix of income so that you'll have perhaps more Schedule F income. Now with that comes some additional tax. So that's something that there's some trade-off there. And probably for many of you, not worth it. That additional tax will probably offset some of the savings that you might get from qualifying for the PPP forgivable loan. Okay. All right. You guys, if you have any additions, you can chime in, but I'm going to keep forging ahead here. One of the questions and lots of rumors flying around, okay, about whether or not farmers that are going to receive a PPP loan or an EIDL loan, if you're going to receive one of those two, will that disqualify you from the eventual USDA administered CFAP payments, the traditional route of payment that we're used to receiving as farmers? It's going to eventually flow through the Farm Service Agency office. We don't have all the details, and Ben's going to share more of what he knows here later on, and he shared some of that last week. We know roughly how the allocations are, but beyond that, not much. But from what we know, everything that we've heard, all of the language points to this not disqualifying farmers from receiving those CFAP dollars. So that's something I think we want to make pretty clear, that everything that we know, all the experts that have talked and continue to follow this, there's nothing in the language, in any part of the bill that would suggest that there's any disqualification from receiving those funds if you receive a PPP or EIDL loan. So I hope that makes it clear that one will not disqualify you from the other. The next to last bullet point brings up, well, some of the things that you have to attest to on the loan application, that you have a certain economic uncertainty and you need the funds in order to keep employees on the payroll. We're paraphrasing here, but essentially both of those things you have to attest to be able to receive the PPP loan. Is there audit concerns? Well, there's at least one prominent blogger that indicates this morning that there might be. However, I think talking to some other folks, and as we look at this a little bit closer, I think farmers in general will qualify based on both of those. And we can argue the merits of whether or not we're going to qualify at this point, but we don't know yet what those audit guidelines are going to be. But I think it's a safe bet to say that it's very likely that we're going to qualify for that forgiveness based on what we know now. All right. Was that too wishy-washy? Hopefully not. We think it's probably audit proof. I wouldn't say I'm 100% certain, but I'm reasonably certain. All right, the other thing that I'll end with is partnerships and LLCs. You know, there's been some back and forth on this as far as some of the different types of partnerships and LLCs and combinations that might exist out there. Partnerships and LLCs need to submit their loans at that entity level. So that's been made very clear. What's not been made very clear is if we have an individual, and let's take Peggy, and she has a Schedule F, and she's also part of a partnership with Diane, Ben, and David. Okay, so she's also a member of a partnership with these other 3 individuals. You know, is she going to be able to qualify as one of the partners at that partnership level and theoretically receive $100,000 as a PPP loan as a partner member and also on her own as a Schedule F? Well, we don't see anything that leads us to believe that there's any disqualification in that instance. I don't know whether lenders are going to go as far as allowing you to go through that, especially if you have the same lender that's going to pass both loans through their portal. I think the original intent was to make a Social Security number eligible for only $100,000. I think that more or less was the intent. However, I think that there's a loophole there that some could take advantage of. So I'll leave it there. I'll pause for any questions and let Peggy chime in if she's got additional comments on this PPP. And she's going to actually, I think you're next, right?
I am.
You can clean up everything that I've said wrong.
Nothing wrong, Barry. No, not at all. I do want to reiterate what you said, though. I've asked a number of my colleagues about the clash, if there is a potential clash between PPP and or EIDL and CFAP, and everyone agrees that there's nothing in the language of the CARES Act that would suggest that. So if there is a clash, it will surprise us all.
Yeah.
But let's go on and talk about forgiveness. We may have some producers already out there who have their PPP loans, and hopefully more that will apply and receive them. An important component and incentive of the program actually is the ability to have a certain amount of that loan forgiven. And I know that a lot of our lenders are working with businesses to try to match up that forgiven part with the loan request. So let's just talk for a minute about the loan forgiveness component. That is going to be something that you'll do down the road. The application's not up yet for that, but there will be an application process, and the lenders will be the ones to approve that loan forgiveness amount. The intent in the legislation is that the 8-week total of payroll, including employee benefits, not employer benefits, or the owner compensation replacement that Barry described as Schedule F, and mortgage interest and payments on leases and utility payments, that 8-week total of those amounts will be forgiven. But there's a stipulation that at least 75% of the total that is forgiven has to be simply for payroll costs. So those other costs can't exceed 25%. And then there are also provisions for reductions that would be made if you don't maintain the basically the employee salary and wages that you had previously. So thinking about the fact that this is the intent of this legislation, or this program in the legislation, is to keep employees working. If you can't maintain that previous salary and wage commitment that you had, there could be a reduction. But note that if you had a reduction during the period between February 15th and June 30th, but you increase employees back up to your usual amount by June 30th, then there won't be a reduction in your forgiveness amount. So there's going to be a lot to work through here. And we're not going to get into the details. We're still trying to sort them out, honestly. But we know that we can at least give you guidance on how important it is to keep those expenditures dedicated to payroll for the most part, at least 75% of them, and to try to get your workforce back up where it was if you have had to suffer a reduction because of COVID. Get that workforce back up by June 30. And then also note that if you do apply for EIDL, the next program that we're going to talk about, that advance is also reduced from the PPP loan forgiveness amount. So a lot to work through there. And Barry and I were talking about it earlier, just trying to get our heads around all the rules that are going to come with forgiveness. And that it's especially difficult when the agency hasn't quite given us all of their guidance yet. So we're awaiting that guidance.
Yeah.
And we can provide further information when we receive that. What would you like to add to that, Barry?
Well, I guess I would just add the issue of taxability to what we're going to expect. We don't have any guidance on that either, as far as whether or not this forgivable loan is going to be taxable, and then also the expenses that go along with that forgivable loan portion. Are we going to be able to take those deductions? And for those tax preparers and practitioners that are on with us this evening, there's a lot of speculation, but we don't have anything certain yet. And I think there's some concern out there that this will be an issue going forward. Hopefully it's not a negative that we see. But that's,
yeah. What I'm hearing there is the forgiveness will be it will be excluded from gross income, correct? Is that what you've heard, Barry?
Well, that's the calculation, but it also, the payroll expenses will also, those expenses may not be won't be deducted.
Right.
But
isn't that nice when we've heard the same thing or learned the same thing? That's what I've learned as well.
It's, but nothing concrete yet.
Yes. So we need further guidance, and we should emphasize the importance of your accounting system here, because you are going to have to submit an application for forgiveness. You're going to have to prove what your costs were. I know that lenders are setting up separate accounts for these loans as they come in. So that's a great start. And then careful bookkeeping, and Diane can certainly attest to the importance of that. But very, very careful documentation we know will be expected in that application process.
And Peggy, if I'll jump in here for you and Barry, is a question that kind of goes on the line of record keeping, but any ideas on what they will be looking for in regard to the 8 weeks worth of wages if I'm that self-employed farmer with no employees? And that was a question from Stan.
Nothing that I've seen yet. Peggy, have you seen anything to that regard, as far as what's going to be evidence of? My guess is this is a little bit of a different kind of compensation. This is a different kind of compensation protection, if you will. It's not for payroll for employees, so it's not like you're continuing to hire yourself. You're going to be continuing to work as a self-employed sole proprietor. No, I guess the short answer is no. I don't know any guidance yet as far as what's going to qualify for acceptable in any kind of acceptable type of documentation that will enable us to have that loan forgiven. Nothing that I've seen yet. Peggy, have you?
Well, for the owner's compensation portion, I would imagine, am I correct, Barry, that they have to submit the Schedule F with the application?
They do. They have to submit the Schedule F and one of the Schedule 1 of the 1040, which is the same, basically.
I would think that's still going to be critical in the forgiveness portion, and they may tie it back to that just for that part of the forgiveness. But
My guess is that will be.
That's it. I don't
That'll
know.
be the application, perhaps, and the evidence for forgiveness. I don't know that there's going to be two separate documents.
Yeah, that would be my best guess at this point, but.
Great questions, Dan.
Okay. What do we have next?
I think it's all on you, EIDL.
Okay. EIDL. And so we raised the question, are farms now eligible? I mentioned this program back in one of our earlier Farm Office Live webinars, but I said that we're not going to look too far into it because it appears that agricultural enterprises are not eligible, and that was because of conflicting language between the CARES Act and the Small Business Act. And that language has now been removed as a result of the legislation just enacted last Friday. So EIDL is now extended to agricultural enterprises, very similar to the PPP, where we're looking at a 500 employee limit. The loan terms are less generous though than PPP and can be up to 30 years with 3.75 interest. And I should note here that this program, unlike PPP, is going to be based upon the borrower's credit. And so there is going to be different terms that comes from that approval process based upon credit and collateral and those typical financial concerns that we have. So slightly different, but the uses for this program are broader than in PPP. They can be used for payroll. However, there's a qualification that if you're using PPP for payroll, you can't use EIDL for payroll. But if you're not in PPP, you can use your EIDL funds for payroll, as well as for fixed debt and other kinds of accounts payable, for sick leave. If you have some material costs that have gone up as a result of COVID, you can use it for that, for rental or mortgage payments and other kinds of obligations that have arisen because of losses due to COVID. But note, that's all qualified by the fact that you can't duplicate PPP expenditures with an EIDL loan. And so it could be a valuable tool for those of you who may not be able to get into PPP, but there's a couple of drawbacks. The first being that there's right now a hold on the program. Even though there was an injection of additional funds into this loan program, they had such a backlog that they are not reopening the program despite those additional funds until they clear up their queue. This is one where you will apply directly to SBA. And so SBA is handling that queue and that application process, and they're not going to reopen it yet. It's not open yet. I've been checking, and it still says we won't reopen until we clear up our queue. And I don't know how many. Do you, Barry, have you heard how many are in the queue on this one? So it could be, he's shaking his head no. It could be that we may not get a shot at this now that they've extended to agricultural enterprises. So I don't want to be overly optimistic, but it may be that the queue itself will clear those additional funds that have been added to EIDL. Now, I should note the final bullet there that there's a really nice incentive for this program, and that's the emergency advance provision. If you apply for an EIDL loan, you may also request an emergency advance. And in the first iteration of this loan program, that advance was an automatic $10,000 that you received right away. And that advance is basically a grant. It's not subject to repayment. But it does, however, if you have a PPP loan, it does reduce the amount of your forgiveness on PPP. Now, this is something that is apparently changing, and Barry had heard about it earlier that maybe the SBA was going to limit this advance to $1,000 per person, per employee, I should say. And I have enough I have not found official word from SBA stating that, but I have heard a few others repeat that the plan, the intent of SBA, due to the popularity of the program, is to reduce that emergency advance to $1,000 per employee up to a maximum of $10,000. So that amount could change if indeed that's what they're doing. But again, I don't have any official statement from SBA. There was one district office in Massachusetts that had said that from SBA, and they have now removed that statement. So there's a little bit of confusion over what that emergency advance amount will be if you apply for the loan. And I should also note that even if you apply for the loan and you are not approved for the loan, you can keep that emergency advance. So it's a nice little tool that can help through a difficult period if you can get in the queue and apply and receive that full $10,000 in addition to additional loan amounts that could be paid back over a prolonged period up to 30 years. So that's EIDL. Are there any questions anyone has about that, or anything the rest of the team would like to add? I forgot to give my pun, which was idle is idle. You guys might like that. Idle is idling while we wait for that queue to clear up.
Pretty important to know which part of idle you're in then, because of this could be potentially because of the emergency advance, right? From 10,000 to maybe it's only 1,000 or 2, depending on your employee.
Yes, and I think that, David, you point out that that could be a very controversial move if indeed that is what they do, because we know that some have already received the full 10,000 advance that was not based on employee numbers. So we'll see if they do that. But yes, your place in the queue would have determined that, I think.
Yeah, I don't think the words fair and equal will be uttered in many of these programs when people look at the equitable arrangement of these, especially for those that will be shut out. So I guess, Barry, my question for you, and plenty of time for folks to type into the Q&A, taxable, any rumors on the taxable? This would be like a grant taxable, maybe? We don't know. On the idle money?
Oh.
For the emergency advance?
I'm going to assume that that would be treated the same as the PPP.
When it all comes down. So yeah. Keep our ears. So these are things that your shop will be tracking. Hopefully by the time you roll into tax schools, you'll maybe have some better clarity on this.
I hope long before that. Here in the next couple.
Hold your breath.
Yeah, right. Yeah, who knows? But there'll be enough pressure come to bear that I think they'll have to clear it up here once we get through this next flush of loans. Who knows? I mean, will we exhaust this PPP pool, and will there still be enough disgruntled small business owners that will enable us to have another round? I don't know. I kind of doubt it. I mean, we can only borrow so much money, can't we? Maybe. It seems like we continue to rack up the, I mean, I know that we need it. The economy has to be supported in times like this, but I guess we'll see.
Now, I guess the question would be is, for agricultural purposes, if Peggy, if I understood you right, probably no ag producers on the first part of idle because of the rules?
No,
or were there some that actually slipped in by accident?
Not from what I've heard. A lot of lenders were very hesitant to accept those or to encourage them to apply for the idle loans along with PPP because of that conflict between the laws. And for this one, remember, they applied directly to SBA, and on the application, there was a checkbox, and it said, if you're agricultural, go no further, you can't apply. So I wouldn't have expected that many got through under those circumstances, nor would I expect that any of them are in that queue that's going to clear up. So once it reopens, we'll see the first probably ag producers apply.
So 3 days ago, we were not eligible. Now it's something for professionals, financial folks to keep on their radar, especially the ones that are on here tonight. This might be something that they're watching to see when it gets put into gear, there may be a chance to help some of their ag and farm businesses to get in on this program, which a week ago, we could not say that. So take home message number one of tonight's webinar or Zoom here is that this is a program now that farmers could jump into once it's put into gear.
Yes, and what I like about this program is that it's more broad to catch some of those other hardships that a business may have suffered. So if we can get in, it could be pretty useful.
Peggy, will you say something about the blog you just wrote today where people could go and read some more information on this? Specifically, you made mention to this on your farm, your legal blog.
Yes, on our farm office website, I just wrote a blog that covers PPP and EIDL, the changes to both of those programs as a result of last week's legislation. So you can find more details there.
And all they need to do is go to farmoffice.osu.edu. And I think probably Julie's already putting that in the chat box for people to see. If I know Julie behind the scenes, she's already got it there for you. You can check out that blog. Anything else, team, on EIDL?
I just want to reiterate back to PPP. If you're going to do it quickly. You know, if you're going to try to get in to see your lender, or if you haven't done it yet, I would suggest probably tomorrow and probably Wednesday at the latest, because it's going to go quickly. Even if you do get in here in the next couple of days, there's no guarantees. But if you're going to consider it, do it quickly.
Yes, and
David.
Oops.
Go ahead, Peggy.
If you have interest in the EIDL loans, you can go directly to the SBA website. The loan portal is there. And so you can watch that and keep checking to see when they reopen it. You'll be able to apply directly from that website. Go ahead, Diane.
Yeah, David, there is a question in the chat box.
Yeah, you want to grab that for us, Diane?
Sure. This comes from Bruce, and his question is, for a contract swine producer, the financial stress may come as the barn sits empty later in 2020 compared to now. Is there a fit now for a contract swine producer in either PPP or EIDL that would be applicable?
As I understand it, not in PPP. I don't think that's going to fit. I mean, that essentially is the way it's structured now is at the end of June. Those expenses that need to be considered for loan forgiveness have to be included in the forgivable portion. So anything past that, there's nothing. EIDL, I'm not so sure.
Well, I think that we could fit it into the language in EIDL that allows it to be used for other obligations that are due to revenue losses. If you can't repay obligations because of lost revenue due to COVID, that language is in EIDL. So I'm thinking we could, that would be the best shot. Yeah, it's clearly this program, but even before COVID, this program, the intent of this program is to address disasters. So it's a little more broad in how it views those disaster impacts. So I don't know, Bruce, it might be possible. I think it's definitely a better option than PPP.
And we may not have seen the last mechanism of support to the ag industry outside of these programs that might be coming later down this year too. So there may be other ways that our livestock producers that are heading into a rough stretch may be helped out via our government later too. Okay, any other questions on EIDL or any PPP follow-ups? If not, we can move into the next subject. All right, so we're gonna turn it over to Ben Brown. Ben, I believe you're gonna do the CFAP. And last week you introduced us to what's great is every Monday we show up and here we are with some new updates. But last week you talked about the Corona's Food Assistance Program. So you have a quick update for us tonight. So Ben, I'm gonna turn it your way.
Yeah, and I hope thank you, David. I really appreciate this. It's great to be with all of you tonight, and to follow Barry and Peggy is just a great joy. They're really smart and really good, and it's great to work with them. I do want to follow up on maybe Bruce's comment just real quick, kind of reiterating a little bit of what David said to bridge the gap. David gave the indication that we could see more funding through USDA and through support programs to help pork producers. Contract producers are an interesting subset of the industry from the standpoint that we haven't seen much support for livestock in the past in USDA programs, but even in the programs we have currently, they're only for those that own the animals. And so this is where some of our payment limitations come a little bit to nip us a little bit, is that it's who owns the pig, not necessarily the contract growers in that case. So we'll have to see. I guess I would just tag on to Bruce, the comments related to Bruce, and then also David's comment about support for the ag industry is, contract growers are obviously part of this picture too, and we just haven't seen much support for them. So these are my next couple of slides, and I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this because I kind of went through CFAP pretty in depth last week, but we did have some new stuff come out this week, especially on the food purchases and distribution side of the equation. But we've also been getting a lot of questions related to the direct payment portion as well. And so I just want to be available and maybe answer some questions, but I did kind of give my indication of how I think these programs will be implemented as we move forward. Just a reminder that there were two parts to the CFAP funding, which was released Friday the 17th in the evening. So we were pretty green when we got around to Monday of last week. There was two parts to it: $16 billion in direct aid to producers. The split outs I have by commodities there are what's been reported to us by the Senate Appropriations Chairman, Senator John Hoeven of North Dakota. USDA has not confirmed these splits. That's just what the Senate Appropriations Chair has relayed to us in terms of where we could see splits in terms of the direct assistance. But it is important to note USDA has not confirmed these to us. So I am providing those there as the different breakouts. Then my other chart that I've got there represents the $3 billion in the purchases, distribution, and how do we plan to buy food and then make sure it's getting to the people that need it. All I've done here is the gray bars that you see across the bottom. Those represent the initial jobless claims for the week, or initial claims of unemployment. We saw big spikes. These are unprecedented week-on-week roll-ons to unemployment and unemployment insurance, especially. The red bars represent the unemployment insurance numbers. These are state-led programs. So these are people that are now enrolling in state unemployment insurance. And you can see 16 million people on unemployment insurance. And then if you add the gray bars all together, that's 26 people filing for jobless claims first time in the last 5 weeks, or 6 weeks, I guess, 5-6 weeks. So these are, the reason I set this up a little bit is, we had $3 billion for the food purchases and distribution program, $16 billion for direct support to producers and growers. And both sides are now saying, hey, this money is just not going to be enough to support us. And USDA is going to have to think creatively about how they roll these programs out and how they administer them. And so, David, if you wouldn't mind going to my next slide, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you. So here's what we've learned in the last week. And this slide's kind of busy, and I do apologize for that. The team only gives me 2 slides or 1 slide, so I have to be creative in how I do this. But I only noticed 2 of them are laughing. The other 2 are kind of scowling at me. So what we've learned in the last week, now Barry's shaking his head. At least he's paying attention to me. Thank you, Barry. So let me point your attention to the upper right-hand corner first. Let's cover kind of the elephant in the room in terms of the big questions I've been getting asked. So in that upper right-hand corner, the dotted red box, this relates to that $16 billion in direct payments, direct support. We have little to no information about specifics, how this program will be rolled out, logistics. I gave you my assumptions on how this program would be rolled out last week in terms of where we would start to see or which commodities we'd expect to go first. The agencies I expected to handle a lot of these claims. I still expect your traditional row crops and livestock to be handled by the Farm Service Agency and to be rolled out first. I think the specialty crop programs are going to take a while to figure out because we don't have a good price series for those. And it appears that the Agriculture Marketing Service is going to be the ones that administer that program. One of the challenges with the Ag Marketing Service is they're not used to these type of direct payment systems, and they don't have an office in every county. So as producers, we're pretty used to at this point going to the FSA office and certifying crops, getting signed up and different stuff like that. The AMS has regional offices, and those regional offices mostly take care of inspection of poultry, meats, and eggs, right? So I do expect that there'll be some type of program where you fill out a form for direct assistance to specialty crops or local foods, and you send that to AMS in DC. So it's going to be a very different system than I think what we're going to see on the traditional row crops and the livestock side. I'm still expecting that, and I think that's what we're getting indication now out of DC as well. What we've learned in the last couple of weeks, though, relates to the last week, not the last couple of weeks, is the Food Purchases and Distribution Act, that $3 billion. USDA, the Ag Marketing Service, they're going to be the ones that administer this program. And the Ag Marketing Service has traditionally been the ones that have administered our food purchases and distribution programs. If you think back to the trade aid assistance, there was components of those trade aid packages that include food aid and distribution as well. This one's going to be administered by the AMS. They have made regional and local food distributors the focal point of a federal contract. And it's important to note that these are federal contracts. So USDA is not going to be the ones administering the actual purchase of the food. They're going to submit an RFP, which was released on April 24th, for food distributors to basically submit applications to be the ones that handle all the logistics in terms of procurement of the food, packaging the food, and then the delivery of the food to the food banks or nonprofit 501c3s. These will come in individual boxes ready to basically go from delivery to a car or a vehicle to take home with you. This has almost mirror images to what we've heard out of USDA the last 2 years in terms of their Harvest Box initiative, where basically local food would be procured, put into a box, and sent to folks that need food assistance. And so, this has semblance to that. The distributors will have approved contracts. They'll be in charge of all the relationships with the customers, the local producers, and then compliance with the USDA AMS. So USDA is basically opening up an application process. Distributors will then take over from there. And after they've delivered the food, then they'll submit compliance to USDA along with audits and stuff like that. And USDA will write them a check and reimburse them for the food they've processed. From a state farm standpoint, if you do have farms or if you work in the area of like local foods and people that grow fresh fruits and vegetables or dairy or pre-cooked chicken, pork products, stuff like that, those groups can go together or go in and become a distributor and file an application to basically work box the food and get it to these nonprofit 501c3s. However, you do have to prove to AMS that you have a history of doing this, that you have capacity to do this, and basically the logistics aspect of it. And so there will be priority, I guess, in kind of some of these things in terms of how things are going. But USDA AMS has indicated that they will release the list of approved distributors on their website after the May 8th announcement of who those distributors are. Producers can reach out to them and start working on contracting food. 501c3s and nonprofits can also reach out to them and say, hey, we need assistance as well. But there is an application, and it's not long and it's not hard. It does contain 4 parts. basically certifying some of the different things I've talked about. But one of the interesting things I think, or two of the interesting things, let me mark out two of the interesting things. The first thing is this will be done on a regional basis. So the AMS has split the country into 7 components. You do not have to, apply for just one region. You can do both regions, and you don't have to apply for the full region. You can do a component of the larger region. Ohio's in the Midwest region, so our region goes all the way from Ohio to Kansas. However, there will be priority given to those that can to reach a broader swath. The second thing is that you have to meet, when you fill out the application, you have to certify that, or I shouldn't say you have to certify it. You have to indicate which line or which boxes you're going to fill. And you don't have to do just one, you can do multiple, but I've listed the 5 boxes here. They're fresh fruits and produce, not processed, not frozen, fresh fruit and vegetable produce. A variety of dairy products, including cheeses and yogurts and fresh milk. Then box 3, pre-cooked chicken and pork products. Box 4 is any combination of the previous 3, and then box 5 is fresh fluid milk. It can also be included in the box 3 above and be sent out with that as well. The only thing I would add in here is that when we look at these boxes, and again, the distributor will have to list how many boxes they plan to send out every week, who they plan to deliver to. And they'll have to list these boxes that they're going to deliver, and that's going to be all a part of the process that AMS is going to use to work through these contracts, and then award the distributors their application or their charge to go out and buy produce and deliver it to food banks and nonprofit 501c3s.
Ben, and I think you might have answered this, but we want to make sure the dairy products that are in Rory, of course, our friend Rory, Wayne County.
Yeah.
Big dairy county. What dairy products are included in the food distribution boxes? Cheese, yogurt, cottage cheese, ice cream, fluid milk. Any of all?
Yeah. So here's the dairy products box: natural and processed cheeses, instant milk, yogurt, butter, and fluid milk.
And I'm not hearing any almond milk in there. There's my sarcastic comment. And Ben, can there be a variety, when you say variety of dairy products, could it be a variety of cheeses? Like if a local cheese company wanted to do boxes, could they do multiple different cheeses to put in a box, or does it have to include some of the soft to fluid, the different types of dairy products from a soft?
I'm looking here. It just says natural and processed cheeses, and then when you get back to the application, it just asks for it just asks for types of cheeses. So I think, everything's everything's possible.
And does there need to be a weight? Are these boxes by a weight, or how are they determined?
It's a great question. So that's part of the application process in terms of what you would put in your box and how much would go in each box for the distributor. It's just meant for household consumption. So these are to be made on a box to go to household consumption, not a full truck coming in and the food bank then having to divvy everything out and split it up. Everything's supposed to be in already packaged and ready to go boxes or containers.
Great.
Are there any other questions? I don't know how many people we have that are interested in this, but if you do have people ask about it, I would let them know that the process or the distributors are the ones that need to fill out the application and go through the process. But then once those distributors are awarded and made known, that's when then local producers can reach out, or food banks or 501c3s can then reach out. So they're basically creating a middle point for both the two ends to come together, a clearinghouse, if you will. And that's what we know about that.
So it could be more of an aggregator.
Yeah.
Hey, Ben.
And I mean, I'm sure we're gonna learn a lot more about this program the longer we go. This is different than most of the food distribution products we normally work with. And again, I think part of the reason why this one's different is this has great mirror-like characteristics of the Harvest Box proposal that USDA has been proposing the last 3 years. I see Peggy nodding her head. Do you have something you want to add, Peggy?
Oh, I agree with that, but I want to add a concern I have for our produce growers, because there is one requirement that we do know for that box, and that is that you can only sell through that if you have gone through an audit, either the USDA GAP audit by AMS or the Global Food Safety Initiative audit. So that's, I think, going to knock out some of our smaller and mid-sized producers that may not have gone through that process. So bit of a concern there.
And Ben, I think we have a question that comes up in our question and answer, and we thank you, Jeff, for that question, because it ties into that. What is the oversight agency that would make sure the distributors keep the food boxes up to certain quality standards?
Yeah, hi Jeff, how's it going? AMS, the Ag Marketing Service, is going to be the ones doing the audits. I assume this will be a trained part of some of their already existing food product inspectors that will then just kind of be repurposed for these different things. We don't know, I have no idea, maybe Peggy does, if these are going to be random audits, or I assume they will be. It just says will be subject to audit and will be reviewed at appropriate measure for appropriate measures. It specifically mentions quality, content, and then to make sure that they're following their proposal that they submitted. Peggy, do you have any information outside of that?
No, I don't. I see we had a comment from Beth Sheckelhoff that she agrees that that will knock out a lot of our Ohio producers.
They are doing those inspections though. I don't know how, somebody else that's more experienced in this area might know how long that takes.
Mm-hmm.
But they are doing those for producers that want to participate.
This will be something you'll be keeping up, Ben, and you'll be keeping us updated as we go forward the more. And I mean, we're only a week, what, 10 days, week? 10 days into this program. And
yeah, well, and AMS released their RFP on Friday. So, like, once again, 3 days.
3 days.
You getting pretty good at this. So is Peggy and Barry with the IDLE and PPP. We're getting pretty good at this.
This is how we know you don't get in trouble during the weekend, Ben. It's time to look through all this information.
Peggy, do you have anything else you want to add? Thanks for the point about the produce growers. I didn't know how big of a swath that would be.
No, I think you covered it well. Thanks, Ben.
Okay.
Thanks. So now, Ben, one of the other questions that came through at the end of last week's Zoom, and the person who asked it hasn't even gotten on yet tonight, so we're going to have to drop him a text, say jump on here. But ethanol and biofuel update.
Yep. So this was a question we got from one of our educators last week, asking for kind of a big picture look at ethanol and biofuel and where we're heading in terms of our ability to contain and sustain an ethanol industry in Ohio as we move forward. And this is something I spend a lot of time thinking about. I love thinking about biofuels just because it's a unique economic problem to solve, right? It's one of those that we're trying to get other countries to replicate. How do we get them to replicate? How's it worked in the United States? Has it created some unintended consequences in the United States? So anyways, it's just an interesting subject matter to look into. I won't bore you with the ins and the outs and the nutshells of stuff because I could spend a full hour just talking about biofuels. But I did just pull three headlines that I saw in the last week, I guess week to 10 days, a little over 10 days, actually 12 days. Related to biofuels and some of the big picture implications that we could see down the road. First and foremost, the chart that we see there on the left, this represents just kind of how big of a hit we've taken in biofuels as a country. This is basically, I've turned everything into an annualized supply and demand. So these are weekly estimates all the way back to a year ago, April of 19. I've just turned them into annualized values instead of weekly values. The red line and then the red dotted line that you see there, the red dotted line is 10% of gasoline demand or gasoline consumption. We did see it come back up this last week, maybe possibly signaling an end to the downturn or the constant downfall. I am expecting, gasoline demand to kind of have a more rapid uptick, so almost like a V-shaped demand curve once we kind of work our way through this. And Barry and I have talked about this too. It'll be flatter, I think, than what I initially thought. I think it'll be flatter, but I do expect it to be more V-shaped. I expect the curve on the ethanol side to be more U-shaped with a very slow and gradual bottom that eventually comes back up. And you can start to see it almost form a little bit in some of these ethanol production numbers. The blue bars there represent how much ethanol we produce per week. As a form, these are 1,000 gallons per week. So it really kind of ties into my first newsletter article that I see up there. Governors have asked Trump to waive biofuel quotas amid pandemic. This is something you all are probably more familiar, or you've heard your clientele talk about small refinery exemptions, which are given to individual oil refiners that are seeking relief from having to maintain or abide by the RFS, basically saying that by abiding by the RFS, we're put in economic hardship. And this is something that, again, we've seen big upticks in the last 3 years in the awarding of those small oil refiners. Just earlier this month, the circuit court out in Denver ruled that the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, has misused that program in terms of how they've awarded those small refinery exemptions. And so right now, corn producers and oil renewable fuels supporters are hoping that rule gets applied nationwide. But one of the other aspects, so EPA has a tool to use small refinery exemptions, but they also can grant states exemptions from the RFS as well. And typically those have been unsuccessful because it's hard to prove that the RFS is causing broad scale economic hardship. We've seen them before. Back in 2012 was probably the closest we've ever been from the standpoint that corn prices were high in 2012, creating high ethanol prices, and therefore a lot of states applied and asked for exemption due to the high ethanol prices. This go around, there's been 5 states, Louisiana, Texas, Oklahoma, Utah, and Wyoming. Their governors have all asked Trump to waive the biofuel quotas amid the pandemic. This is exactly kind of very similar to how the small exemption waivers worked, only on a broader scale, to where we're removing we're removing the amount of compliance that oil refiners then have to abide by. Now, compliance is a tricky word because it's not actually the gallons they purchase. It's just the amount of certificates or pieces of paper that then they have to submit to the EPA at the end of the year. And we call those pieces of paper RINs, or renewable identification numbers. And so simple, supply and demand here, stick with me for just a second. I promise I won't dig too deep in the weeds here, but when you cut down the demand, right, you're lowering the compliance for those pieces of paper or the RINs. It completely crashes the price of a RIN, right? You're removing the demand, but you're not removing the supply. And so the question becomes, who loses when you reduce the price of those RINs? And the answer there is any type of future infrastructure developments around ethanol and renewable fuels. And so this is something that we're kind of waiting. EPA now has 90 days to rule on this. There's some people that actually say they have a case. There's some people that are saying, no, this is just oil companies being wanting some economic relief because they're struggling on their oil side, but that's no way related. That hardship's were related to the abiding by the RFS. However, like I said, there is some economic justification that they are facing some hardship by having to abide by the RFS. So we'll have to see. In the past, these haven't been successful, but I think this is probably, we're dealing with a more friendly EPA administration this go around that might actually move this through. And then we'll have a fight on our hands between oil and corn again, depending on how that turns out. The second blog post there, this came from DTN's commodity blog post. The petroleum industry is also asking EPA to conduct new basically RFS rulemaking for 2020. So every year, the EPA, along with the Department of Energy, establishes how many gallons of gasoline is going to be consumed by the United States before the year begins, and we basically take that number of how many gallons are going to be consumed by the United States, and then there's these volume obligations, which most people think are how many gallons of biofuels we actually consume, and that's actually wrong. And so what we do is we take whatever that number is. So ethanol, it tends to be 15 billion, somewhere around there. And we take that 15 billion gallons of ethanol and we divide it by how many gallons of motor fuel we're going to consume, or that is estimated to consume throughout the year. And that creates a percentage standard. So somewhere around 10 to 11% is where we've been the last couple of years. Then for every gallon of motor fuel that then oil refiners then produce, they, at the end of the year, they have to say, this is how many gallons we actually produced. Here's our RINs that match whatever percentage is set by the percentage standard. Okay, so let me go back and talk about that waiver that got overturned in the 10th Circuit Court related to the small refiner exemptions. That was a part of that calculation, basically reducing total the quota. Now that it's been overturned, the Circuit Court has ruled in favor. The U.S. EPA didn't appeal it. There was some talk initially that they would appeal it. Now, oil refiners want them to set a new RFO, or that renewable volume obligation, basically making it easier to then reach a higher percentage standard. So something we'll have to watch out. If they did that, again, we're putting cracks in the foundation of our ethanol industry, because then we would see other changes coming down the pipeline as well. And then the bottom bullet point that just kind of sums up everything we've seen so far is the crash in gasoline consumption has taken and made another hit to farmers, as the coronavirus has crushed the ethanol market, basically reducing driving. Therefore, we don't have the demand for ethanol, because remember, it's a percentage standard of all the gasoline that's consumed throughout the year. And just this last week, we had 560,000 barrels of ethanol produced a day. That's about 46% of that's down 46% from what we normally produce in a day. That equates to about roughly 50 million bushels of corn lost a week. So 50 million, 46, somewhere around in there, a million bushels of corn. You start adding these up, and as I talked about, I'm expecting more of a U-shaped curve on the ethanol production cycle. The USDA lowered their ethanol or corn used for ethanol projections 300 million bushels in their April WASDE. I think we could see right now we're on pace for another 300 million bushel reduction in corn ethanol demand. So that's more of the big picture, but then to the specific question we got last week is, what does the future of ethanol and biofuel look like in Ohio? And I think it really revolves around these questions that we're seeing right now, or what we're seeing run through the courts and what we're seeing being proposed to EPA is, if some of these get approved, I think it's very hard to justify a case for ethanol in Ohio, and especially the Eastern Corn Belt moving forward, just because our plants tend to be a little older and a little bit smaller. And so you'd see a concentration in the western states. So thank you. Are there any questions about that?
No, just a comment. It looks like someone going down and going over the Niagara Falls in a barrel when I look at
That's
your
right.
graph there.
That's right. Barry, you want to do that? Do you want to go over the falls in a barrel? I'll take your picture.
Not good news for the ethanol industry here in the Eastern Corn Belt then, or anywhere right now. So we'll go to the next update, and Peggy, we're going to bounce this your way. Update on unemployment compensation. A lot of talk about unemployment that was part of the CARES Act. Do you want to go into some more in depth on the unemployment compensation?
Sure, thanks, David. This is another one we've been waiting for details about, because if we go back to the CARES Act, it also included provisions for expansion of unemployment insurance benefits in a couple of different ways. And the one that's most applicable to agriculture would be the expanded eligibility provisions in that act. And they named that program the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program, otherwise known by its elegant name of PUA. So PUA will expand eligibility to those who don't typically apply for state unemployment compensation. And so that, of course, would include farmers, self-employed workers, 1099 filers can now apply under this program. And it's administered by the state, just as our traditional unemployment benefit program is administered. And you can see here that I've given you the webpage on the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services that will serve as the portal for applying for these PUA benefits. It's hard to say that without laughing, David.
Yeah, I think you need more of a gut reaction when you say that.
It just doesn't feel right to say that. But there it is, the PUA program. And so this is the hub. Now, I've been checking this consistently since the federal guidance was finally handed down to the states. That took a while. The states have the guidance, and now it's up to the states to start up their programs. And so we have finally seen a change here where now Ohio is far enough down that path that they are allowing those who can qualify for these expanded eligibility benefits to at least register on the portal that you see here. And so let me tell you who can do that. And this registration is just step one. And when they have the actual application process open, then those who are already registered will be ahead in the queue. So who can apply for these? Well, as I said, anyone who doesn't qualify for ordinary state unemployment benefits, including those enhanced benefits that were made available for COVID through the state unemployment insurance program. So self-employed workers like farmers, 1099 tax filers, that's the first question. But the next one is, have you been negatively impacted by COVID? And so do you have COVID? If so, you can apply. Are you caring for someone who has COVID? Have you been diagnosed and potentially have COVID and therefore are not able to work? Is your workplace under quarantine? Are you caring for your school children who, because they can't go to school, you've had to stay home and care for your children? Those are the kinds of situations we're looking for here. So it's not for a typical unemployment situation unless we can tie it to COVID. If we tie it to COVID, you can apply even though you are a farmer, and we don't typically get to do that. So watch for that. What that program will do is on top of the state compensation, it will award an additional $600 per week from the CARES Act funding. And that can last for up to 39 weeks. So it can be a significant help to those who are dealing with COVID themselves or having to care for someone and unable to work because of that. So we'll keep an eye on that, and we'll let you know more once they do open the portal and give us more guidelines on how they'll make that decision to award the benefits. Any questions on that one?
Great. We're looking for some questions to come in at Q&A, but just none right now, Peggy, but just keep the eyes on it, and we'll keep letting people know when it's, I mean, I know we have a lot of programs that all of a sudden it's not like these are programs that we have used day in and year in and day in and month out and year in. So a lot of things happening behind the scenes to make sure they work correctly or as the best as they can under such a short time period. Okay, one of the questions that we had on the way out was what's the expected payments on ARC PLC? I know that Barry, the farmers are making their adjustments to their budgets, and part of our budgeting, we don't have much of the ARC PLC, but a question came in at the end of last one about, okay, Ben, just give us a crystal ball look at your ARC PLC payments maybe for 2019. So I'm going to turn it back to you, Ben.
Thanks, David. Appreciate it. And this is going to be coming out in a Ohio Ag Manager's article this week. I was hoping to get it done today, get it sent out for review, and I just didn't quite get it done. So I apologize, but it'll be up this week sometime. So you all are getting a sneak peek. That's pretty exciting, right? So yeah, one of the questions we got asked last week was, given the declines that we've seen in cash prices, but then also working capital due to stored grain on hand, can we expect to see any support from our traditional risk management programs? So programs that are already authorized on the Farm Bill, appropriated through the Commodity Corporation as well. And so anyways, this is just a review. These next 3 slides represent our review of ARC and PLC payments for corn, soybeans, and wheat for the 2019 crop. So this is last year's crop. Keep in mind, we're still in the 2019 marketing year right now. For corn and soybeans, that marketing year will end August 31st of this year, and then we'll start the 2020 marketing year for this summer's crop. For wheat, that marketing year, or the 2019 marketing year that we're in right now, will end at the end of May. So we're getting really close to being done with May, and then we'll have our prices that then we can throw into these calculations. Just a reminder for those that may be not familiar with ARC and PLC, ARC County is a revenue-based program. So it is both yield time price. So it is a county yield times a national price. The price loss coverage program, or the PLC program, is just a price component, meaning that if a national price falls below a set benchmark, in the case of corn, it's $3.70, it triggers a payment. So what I have done here is these are my estimates for Ohio counties for both ARC County and PLC for 2019 based on the conditions that we see right now. A couple of things I want to point out is up in the right-hand box, or the top left-hand box, these are our change. So I took the February baseline of market year average prices. Keep in mind, it's a national price for the full marketing year. So in February, we were just over half. In fact, we weren't even halfway yet through the marketing year. But we had a good chunk of our crop already marketed, and the national price was at $3.90. The baseline right now is at $3.58. So before March, we were over $3.70. Now after March and after COVID, we're now below $3.70 and triggering some PLC payments, but also we're triggering and seeing some ARC County payments triggered across the state as well. That was a 32-cent decline, 8.2%. We're below that $3.70 reference price. Ohio had a state yield of 164 bushels per acre on corn. If I just take that 32 cents that we've lost for a marketing year average and apply it times our statewide average, that implies a loss of about $52.48 per acre for the full crop. Now, a lot of people had grain already marketed, right? So this is where we have to take off our finance hat and think about what did we actually lose and put on our marketing year hat in terms of what did we lose in the national balance sheet. So stick with me for just a second, because I actually estimate our old crop loss is somewhere in the neighborhood of $20 in terms of our cash prices. But the balance sheet in terms of a marketing year is down $52.48 for corn. The reason some counties are blacked out is we don't have yield data for those counties. There wasn't enough producers that returned yield surveys or production surveys back to USDA in those counties, and so they're blackened out. I have adjusted these from NASS to my expected risk management agency value. So the National Ag Statistics Service is the agency that collects the yields, but they're not the ones that administer the ARC and PLC programs payment. So we have to make a little bit of a conversion. And so I've just made a conversion based on the 7 years of difference between RMA and NASS yields to get a conversion rate. And so if you look in that first map there in the middle of your screen, the biggest payments came in Clark, Champaign, Miami County, kind of that Miami Valley region right there, largely due to the drought and dry weather that we saw in September and August last year, really dampening that top end of the corn yield. You'll notice not a lot of payments up in the northwest corner of the state where we saw lots of rain. Those producers can get some ARC individual payment coverages, but at least on the ARC County side, they didn't have county yields low enough to trigger ARC County corn payments. On the PLC side, just a reminder that PLC is paid out on individual farm yields. So whatever the farm yield is for that FSA farm is what then gets multiplied by that national rate. In this case, all I've done is I've taken the county average PLC yield. So what's on the books with FSA, and then multiplied it by that negative 30, or excuse me, that it'd be the difference in 370 and 358, which is 12 cents. So I've taken 12 cents times the county average PLC yield rate to get those payments there on the right-hand side. David, would you mind going to my next slide, please? And these will all be available if you want to look at them closer on our website. Here's soybeans. Pre-COVID, which I'm using again, January is my pre-COVID number of 897. The reference price for soybeans is 840 per bushel. Currently, our marketing year price sits at 857 a bushel, which is above that PLC reference price at 840. So if you look over to the right-hand side, the right graphic, the right map, all those counties are zero because we have not triggered a PLC payment rate. Therefore, no counties are expected to get PLC payments. Again, we do see quite several counties triggering some pretty large ARC County soybean payments, especially in that Miami Valley region where we saw some dryness last fall as we headed into harvest right there during the pollination stage. And so we see some dryness there. Not as big a losses in terms of a national balance sheet on the soybean side as what we saw on corn. And then David, if you'd go to my final slide real quick. Here's wheat. And for wheat, we do see a pretty substantial payment rate for wheat. Pre-COVID was 454. Post-COVID right now is 450. Not a big change because, again, that marketing year ends the end of May. So we're a good chunk of our way through the marketing year already. Most producers already had their wheat crop sold or had marketed it at prices above what we're currently seeing. Of course, we've got really good prices right now, or we did up until, I guess, the last couple of days, but they're still strong. And so anyways, some good wheat prices, but because a good chunk of the grain was marketed earlier in the year, our national average marketing year price for wheat is at $4.50. It's $1 below our reference price. So if we take $1 times all those PLC yields, again, on the right, I should have switched these around. And I do apologize because now I'm seeing that I'm explaining this from left to right to center. It would have been nice just to go across the screen, but on the right-hand side there, you'll see the payment rates. And again, these are going to be based on individual farm yields on the PLC case, but that should get you in the ballpark. The ARC County payment rates, again, we do see most counties triggering an ARC County wheat payment because we had low wheat yields in 2019 as well. So with that, these slides will be available on the Farm Office website along with the recording of this presentation. If anybody's got any other questions, we'll have an article put together this week.
You're going to put that on the Ohio Ag Manager website, ohioagmanager.osu.edu. Ben, as I look at these, the only thing that could come to my mind was, man, we nailed it in the Farm Bill meetings with the Farm Service Agency. I was glad to see the numbers that we were talking about just in our local area with our producers, just the importance of coming out to those Farm Bill meetings that were held in conjunction with OSU Extension and our Farm Service Agency offices around Ohio, because that's a pretty variable map there. And what was working for one county, definitely not for other parts.
Well, yeah, I mean, go back one slide to the soybean slide real quick, David.
That's huge.
Look at these differences. That Miami Valley region, we're, $46, $45 an acre. And by the way, I have adjusted these for the base acre conversion. So this is on every base acre, enrolled base acre versus $0 under PLC. Now, granted, soybeans wasn't the hardest decision of the mix. But given what we were talking about on corn, my biggest fear was that everybody was going to just go from ARC County to PLC for all commodities. And we don't know what the participation rates are. We have a pretty good idea. But and the back end. Yeah. And I just want to say, we had a really good team of extension educators across the state that really worked hard on this. And it was really the fruits of their labor that pulled this off, including yourself, David, and a lot of others. So
I want to mention that Julie had put in the chat already that Julie's way ahead of us. She already has the slides posted. So for the folks that are on tonight's Farm Office Live, already has seen a sneak peek to your estimates. So thank you, Ben, for sharing this. And thank you for folks that asked that question on the way out last week. And we'll open it up now, I think. Time for questions, but as you generate your questions, a couple things that I want to mention. So be thinking about your questions, get them in the chat box or in the Q&A box before we end here tonight. Ben's going to do a little post as you go out. Many of you have been on a couple of these already, know on the way out. We'll ask you a quick exit survey, but included in the slide deck, which you can get on the Farm Office Live, of course, is the access to some of our websites. And then, of course, our contact information. If you want to follow up with your individual questions, we are more than happy to do that for you. And I think the one big thing that we need to talk about and mention is that the Farm Office Live, as we move into May, we understand that it was a beautiful day outside across Ohio today. And we understand as we get into May, looking at our forecast, that it's going to be a little tougher to get folks together on a regular basis. So our team has strategized, and some questions that Ben will be asking you later is about when the next Farm Office Live will be Thursday, May 14th. So you want to open up your schedule books and get this scheduled down. This will be Thursday, May 14th in the morning from 9 to 10:30. And same platform, you come back to the same way. It's going to be from 9 to 10:30 a.m. Now, Ben, on the exit survey that he's put, has already asked some questions about your preference when you would like these Farm Office Live. And I see that Julie in the chat has put some of the one that I don't even have there is the ohioagmanager.osu.edu as far as a website to go to. So we'll open it up to, I'm going to stop my share. That way we get our panelists all back together, and just wanted to see if, and Julie just put ohioagmanager.osu.edu in the chat. So thank you, Julie. Looking for any final Q&A. Again, we'll be asking you your opinion on the way out. So I just was it's rhubarb season, and I don't know if you can see this. It's rhubarb season in Coshocton County. So strawberry rhubarb pie with ice cream, Diane, just showed up at my desk here. So the benefits of having a Farm Office Live at home, I'd be willing to share if we weren't in the social distancing. I had enough for everybody tonight, but sorry about that. So are there other questions or closing comments we have from our panelists?
Hey, David, I just wanted to point out that we put up a new page on the Farm Office website that brings all those different government programs together into one place and provides links for where to find the information and the application and other guidance. So that's now, thanks to Julie, she finished it. Thank you, Julie.
Yeah, behind the scenes, she's working.
It's now open and on our main page at farmoffice.osu.edu.
And that is a great one-stop shop then. And our team just wrote an article that went up on Ohio Ag Manager a couple hours ago, just kind of giving an overview of a lot of the different things that we've talked about over the last 4 weeks as a quick reference guide. So a couple resources that you can put on your computer to be able to keep track of these changing programs. So Peggy, Barry, Diane, Ben, Julie, closing thoughts? Because I'm ready to eat pie, as you can tell, so.
We don't want to stand between you and your pie, David.
You can talk all night. I'm out.
I do just want to say thanks for everybody for joining us all month. It was fun doing this and with all of you, and we look to do these again in the future, and we hope you'll join us then too. So.
I would say we're trying to set this up to have them, but we're going to be nimble and react to if there's major changes. We'll put these out as an on-needed basis too, but we want to schedule one a month just to keep folks up to date. And thank you, Stan. Well done. And he didn't even ask for a piece of my rhubarb strawberry pie, so thank you, Stan. Okay, with that, we would like, if there's no questions, it's 9:30, so right on the money. We are done for this evening's program. We just want to wish everyone well, and just have a great rest of the week.
Thanks. Bye-bye.